Reactions galore to verdict of presidential elections petitions tribunal that handed President Buhari victory on Wednesday. Nearly 200 billion naira approved for road construction and rehabilitation. In international news, more than 2,500 still missing after Hurricane Durian ravaged the Bahamas. And in sport, Super Eagles coach General urges Minister of Sport Sunday Dare to resolve conflicts between Nigeria Football Federation and Sports Ministry.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji, national leader of the All Progressives Congress. Asiwaju Bola Tinubu has reacted to President Muhammadu Buhari's victory at the Presidential Elections Tribunal on Wednesday. Tinubu said in a statement the tribunal's verdict was a resounding judicial vindication of the president's personal character and his electoral victory. He said Wednesday was a bright day for the administration of justice. Meanwhile, Senate President Ahmed Lawan has congratulated President Buhari and the All People's Congress for the victory at the Petitions Tribunal. Lawan said the judgment of the tribunal has again put a judicial seal on the mandate freely given to the president by the Nigerian people in the February presidential election. In his reaction, President Buhari himself has called on presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, who sued him to bury the hatchet and join hands with him to move the country forward. The president said in a statement the tribunal verdict is victory for Nigerians who trooped out to elect him for a second term in office. The president said he was never troubled about the outcome of the lawsuit because, as he put it, good conscience fears no evil report. He said he is now vindicated and that he dedicated the victory to God and to Nigerians. Buhari also commended the judiciary for dispensing justice without fear or favor. He said the country now needs to move forward as a cohesive body. While the People's Democratic Party has expected things otherwise, it has rejected and denounced the judgments of the Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal. The party says there were too many reasons, or errors rather, and the tribunal failed to prove fair justice. PDP said in a statement the judgment was a provocative, barefaced subversion of justice and a direct assault on the integrity of the nation's justice system. The party says it is bewildered that the courts could validate what it calls a clear case of perjury and declaration of false information in a sworn affidavit. PDP says it will head to the Supreme Court. And meanwhile, ex-aide to former President Goodluck Jonathan, Reno Mokre, says the tribunal judges were like the Osama bin Laden terrorist that bombed the New York World Trade Center in September 11th, 2001. That day coincided with the tribunal judgment day yesterday. He said the judges had succeeded in bombing Nigeria by declaring as winner someone he described as semi-literate and unqualified. Now to other stories. Many major roads in the country may soon get a facelift as the Federal Executive Council has approved on Wednesday more than 180 billion naira for the construction and rehabilitation of various roads across the nation. Minister of State for Works and Housing, Alhaji Abubakar Aliyu, told State House correspondents after the FEC meeting. The first segment of the approval was for the extension of the Lagos-Badagry Expressway to the Nigerian border with the Republic of Benin. That project would eat up 15 billion naira. Some of the other roads and projects to be covered by the funding include 2 bridges at Kotongoro Rijal Road, construction of additional lane on Kano-Katsina Road, rehabilitation of Outer Marina Bonny Camp Road and Eko Bridge in Lagos, rehabilitation of Ibori-Idomi Western Road in Edo State, construction of Ilogu-Ireni Road in Kwara and Osun State. There are also projects slated for Kano, Borno, Niger State, Jigawa, Imo, and Anambra states and the Federal Capital Territory. Officials of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs say half of the more than 600 Nigerians who registered to be ferried home to Nigeria from South Africa have arrived in Lagos. The other half will be brought back by the weekend. Ministry officials say the Air Peace aircraft that transported the first group will return to South Africa to bring the rest. The repatriation came after at least 12 persons were killed in Pretoria and Johannesburg as South Africans targeted more than 1,000 foreign-owned businesses. Reprisal attacks last week in Nigeria forced South African businesses to shut down for some days. South African embassy in Abuja and the consulate in Lagos temporarily shut down, while Nigeria recalled its High Commissioner from South Africa. It can be a difficult task in Nigeria to get skilled and reliable professionals, but a digital human resource company is changing all that by verifying, training, and aggregating professionals on a single platform. Kelechi Emekalam reports on the system that is not only empowering thousands of Nigerians, but also satisfying employers.
It's been a busy month for Benjamin Meke, whose business involves extra low-voltage installations covering fire alarms and CCTV cameras. Previously, it was tough to get business despite advertising on social media. But since enrolling on the At Your Service platform, his business has been booming.
It's been way better. I think it's more than 3 times what we used to get. And I think also, apart from the monetary value, we also got a lot of exposure. That's very key and is invaluable.
And the service has also benefited many business owners like Felix Ofungo, who had found it quite challenging getting skilled professionals for employment.
It's really been fantastic. Like I said, it's different from any other service we've tried in Nigeria. I started using At Your Service on a personal basis initially, but I have since expanded my use of the service to even my company. So we get a lot of professionals through At Your Service on a corporate basis now, not just on a personal basis.
The digital human resource company is the brainchild of Uchenna Okezie. The company rigorously screens and verifies anyone seeking to enroll on the platform. The idea is to improve access to efficient workforce and reduce unemployment. And it's a service that's speedily gaining traction.
Currently, we have over 10,000, 11,000 at the moment, but the number continues to increase. We're seeing professionals, artisans, freelancers, and very recently we're seeing even students, undergraduates who are seeking internship positions. We're seeing all kinds of people come on board. And these are people in Nigeria, in Ghana, West Africa, and recently we are seeing more interest also from people in East Africa as well. And we continue to empower as many people as we can. I mean, the more people see value in what's at your service, the more they refer their friends, and more people continue to join the platform. So
Nigeria's unemployment rate is currently at 23.1%, and the National Bureau of Statistics projects that it would rise to 33.5% by 2020. The government has embarked on several interventions to reduce the rate of unemployment, and it's expected that platforms like At Your Service could help government's intervention.
Coming up, African news. Zimbabwe says more than $42 billion lost as a result of EU-US sanctions. And later, international news. Hurricane Durian's fury leaves 2,500 missing in the Bahamas.
You are watching ANN.
Dear Mommy, you went out that night with the baby in your tummy, but you did not come back. The baby is very fine and she eats and sleeps a lot. Everyone says that you are in a better place, but I miss you so much. I keep asking them, where is the better place, but nobody answers me. Auntie Carrie just hugs me and says go and play. Mommy, I miss you. Please, when are you coming home?
I still do miss you, Mom. And in honor of your memory, I'm a doctor today working with the MTN Foundation to save mothers and children every day.
Ending mother and child mortality in Nigeria is dear to us. We will keep strengthening this most important bond just for you.
Welcome back. This is CNN News. In African stories, 10 persons have died in a stampede at President Filipe Nyusi's election rally in Mozambique on Wednesday. French news agency AFP quotes a statement from the government Frelimo party that said 85 persons were injured in the stampede in northern Nampula city stadium. In another report by the Portuguese news agency Lusa, quoting local hospitals officials, 16 persons had died. Eyewitnesses say the crush at the stadium reportedly occurred as people were trying to leave the venue after the president had departed. Gates had been closed and were only opened after the departure of the Frelimo candidate, President Nyusi. The report said everyone wanted to leave at the same time, so some who fell were trampled. Zimbabwe government said on Tuesday it has lost $42 billion in 18 months as a result of European Union and U.S. sanctions for alleged electoral fraud and human rights abuses. Information Minister Monica Motswanga told the media on Tuesday that Foreign Affairs Minister Sibusiso Moyo had said in a paper he presented to the cabinet that the country has lost billions of dollars as a result of those sanctions. Motswanga also said Zimbabwe has lost an estimated $4.5 billion bilateral donor support annually since 2001. The country also missed out on $12.5 billion in International Monetary Fund, World Bank and African Development Bank loans. It also missed another $18 billion in commercial loans as a result of the sanctions. The information minister said the sanctions have also caused Zimbabwe's gross domestic product to shrink by $20 billion. But former European Union ambassador to Zimbabwe, Philippe van der Meer, has dispelled the Zimbabwean authorities' claim. He said the collapse of the Zimbabwe economy predicted the sanctions and is related to earlier policy choices. He added that EU sanctions on Zimbabwe were initiated by the Land Reform Program, which he said was characterized by human rights violations. The xenophobic violence in South Africa has created major diplomatic problems for the country on the continent. More than 12 persons have been killed as a result of the attacks. As Agela Kopole reports, South African businesses now engage to find solutions to the xenophobic violence that is eating away at the core of the nation.
Officials briefed concerned business leaders in Johannesburg on their plan to quell xenophobic violence, which has left 12 people dead over the past week. Police say they have the situation under control, but have not divulged any further information.
It doesn't matter what is the face of criminality. So we arrest people that ban, destroy, kill, injure other people. The number of the people arrested up to this point is 639. And since this thing started going forward, we hope we'll be sending them through the systems, sending them through the prosecution until they reach the final end of the whole chain of criminal justice system.
There's been widespread condemnation of the violence. It has sparked a backlash against South African businesses, especially in Nigeria, where companies such as MultiChoice, Vodacom and MTN have been forced to close their doors temporarily.
So we took a decision to close our retail outlets last week after 4 outlets were damaged in vandalism attacks. And we also closed the head office, but we intend to open it again early this week. It is also a great tragedy in that market that the stores that were damaged are actually franchise stores owned by Nigerian business people.
The South African business fraternity have committed to working with authorities in South Africa and Nigeria to find long-term solutions.
I also want to commend the Nigerian government for acting very swiftly to calm the situation down in the last week. In terms of our engagement with the minister, the engagement was very good. The minister took us through what they've done over the last week to quell the situation down. We are very positive with the work that they are doing, and we sincerely hope that we are at the end of the violence and we'll see things returning back to normality.
We had agreed to partner with government on dealing with the issues in the cause or the root cause of what seems to be xenophobic attacks. One was on unemployment, two was on gender and children. So if we were to come up with better plans of how to effectively create employment within the South African communities and as a country, we'd actually be dealing much more with growth within Africa.
On one hand, we have the issues around markets and perceptions of shareholders in terms of the business and commercial side. On the other, we have the diplomatic implications and what's going to happen there in terms of relationships between South Africa and its neighbors and the rest of the continent.
When we return, international news. More than 2,500 still missing after Hurricane Durian ravaged Bahamas Islands. And later, sports. General urges Minister of Sports to resolve conflicts between NFF and Sports Ministry.
You are watching ANN.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit. We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow the story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to international stories. Reports say 2,500 persons are still missing in the wake of the devastating Hurricane Durian in the Bahamas. This includes those who have fled to shelters around the islands. U.S. National Emergency Management Agency spokesman Carl Smith says at a news conference, database processing is underway. Officials have confirmed the death rate at 50 and thousands are in shelters on the islands. Durian slammed into the Bahamas more than a week ago as one of the strongest Caribbean hurricanes on record, packing sustained winds of around 300 kilometers per hour. Smith says more than 5,000 persons had evacuated to New Providence. U.S. Supreme Court has upheld President Donald Trump's new rule that would curtail asylum applications by immigrants at the U.S.-Mexico border. Most immigrants who want to apply for asylum in the U.S. now must first seek asylum in a third country on their way to the U.S. and be rejected by that country. The American Civil Liberties Union and others who challenged the administration's policy in federal court says it violates U.S. immigration law and accused the administration of failing to follow the correct legal process in issuing the rule. The rule would block nearly all families and individuals from countries like El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala from entering the U.S. after crossing through Mexico as asylum seekers. It would also apply to the majority of asylum seekers from Africa, Asia, and elsewhere in South America. This policy is a key element in Trump's hardline immigration policy. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has revealed the U.S. has agreed to delay increasing tariffs on $250 billion worth of Chinese import from October the 1st to the middle of the month as a goodwill gesture. Trump says Chinese Vice Premier Liu He had requested for it and is granting it because China is celebrating its 70th anniversary. The tariffs were set to increase from 25% to 30%. Trade talks could take place during the delay to seek an area of agreement in the trade impasse. China's decision to exempt some U.S. anti-cancer drugs and other goods from its tariffs Trump also welcomed China's Wednesday announcement of its first batch of tariff exemptions for 16 types of U.S. products, including some anti-cancer drugs and lubricants, as well as animal feed ingredients. Some analysts say the gestures may ease tensions in advance of negotiations. Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte says he has been offered a controlling stake in a joint energy deal by Chinese President Xi Jinping in exchange for ignoring an international arbitration in Manila's favor on the South China Sea. In 2016, a tribunal in The Hague ruled in favor of the Philippines in a maritime dispute, which concludes China has no legal basis to claim historic rights to the bulk of the South China Sea. Duterte said Xi had promised him a majority stake in a joint oil and gas exploration venture that could fall within Manila's exclusive economic zone if it ignores the decision by the Permanent Court of Arbitration. An exclusive economic zone gives a country exclusive maritime rights to resources such as fish and oil and gas within 200 nautical miles of that country's landmass. China's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying also confirmed the Philippines is ready to expedite cooperation with China in the joint exploitation of oil and gas. Argentina has announced further currency controls in an effort to tame speculation and stem a spiraling debt crisis. The new measure requires anyone purchasing foreign currency to present a sworn oath, promising to wait at least 5 days before using it to purchase bonds. The old regulation allows a buyer to use the foreign currency to purchase a bond and then immediately sell it at a more favorable exchange rate. The initial restrictions limited the purchase of US dollars and required companies to seek permission from the central bank to access the foreign exchange market to purchase foreign currency and make transfers abroad. Mathuri's decision to implement the controls came after opposition candidate Alberto Fernandez and Fernandez de Coche, who is now his vice presidential candidate, pulled off a stunning upset in last month's primary votes.
Still ahead, sports. Super Eagles coach Geno Rohr urges Minister of Sports Sunday Dare to resolve conflicts between Nigeria Football Federation and Sports Ministry. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. In sport, Super Eagles coach Geno Rohr has urged the Minister of Youth and Sport Development, Sunday Dare, to resolve the conflicts between the Sports Ministry and the Nigerian Football Federation. Rohr says the rift has negatively affected the Eagles. The Super Eagles coach says the Sport Ministry cannot make progress with festering conflicts. Emmanuel Amunike has reported Tanzania Football Federation to FIFA's arbitration committee over non-payment of his salaries and allowances. Tanzania Football Federation says it failed to settle Amunike's contractual entitlement following the two parties' mutual agreement to terminate his contract soon after the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations in Egypt. Amunike says 2 months after AFCON ended, TFF is yet to pay him his entitlement as spelled out in the terms of their contract. The last time Tanzania participated in Africa's flagship football tournament, AFCON, was in 1980 in Lagos. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and all the breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.